nurses all gathered round, and they gazed in wide wonder at the joy they had found. The head nurse spoke up.
Thank you very much, Andy. And from the bottom of my heart, I thank all of you, because I think people talk about our firefighters and our people in the armed forces, police officers. I think the first responders are you guys. So thank you so much for what you guys do. Andy touched on something, but I want to go into a little bit more detail, because I've spent the last 23 months as the president of a nonprofit organization called Democracy at Stake. And I want to tell you what we did and why this is so important. When Andy said that there are people out there that are out to get the justices, I'm going to tell you how right he is. November 6th, we're going to have one of the most important elections that you guys will ever participate in. And every November, everybody says, this is the most important race you participate in. But this is. And it's not the election that you think. It's not the presidency or the Senate or even the House and the Senate races. It's the merit retention race. Now, I want to tell you a little bit about how this works. And please bear with me, because I promise you I will connect the dots. Article 5 of the Florida Constitution is what gives the Supreme Court its authority. It's not the legislature or the governor. It's the Constitution. And the Constitution is a document. It's a piece of paper. But do you know how things get placed on that piece of paper? There's only one way. And that's by a vote of the people, of you. It's not us, it's you. Now, Article 5 does one Supreme Court, places one Supreme Court. There's 5 district courts of appeal. There's 20 judicial circuits across the state of Florida. And there's 67 county courts, one in each county. The way that the justices are chosen, there are 7 justices. It used to be a very fair way. There used to be a committee of 9 people, 3 people selected by the Florida Bar, 3 people selected by the governor, and those 6 people selected 3 more people, so nobody could really take control of what was going on. That committee, called the Judicial Nominating Commission, would be the one that would make a recommendation. They would vet people, they would interview hundreds of people, and then they would send that name up to the governor, and the governor would make an appointment. That's how it works in the state of Florida. Why do we have merit retention? Well, because back in the 70s, we used to have elections for justices. The parties used to get involved. And in the early 70s, there were 3 justices that were run out of the court. One Supreme Court justice died as a fugitive from justice. So the Constitution was amended back in the early 70s, and they said, this is the way we're going to do it. We're going to have that selection process, and the governor will make an appointment. Now, people say there's a flaw in that system, and the flaw is that nobody has ever been removed. Well, I say to you, that's not a flaw. It's a system that worked. It actually worked. And there has been no scandal. You guys cannot say that in the last 40 years you've heard that there was a scandal, corruption, embarrassment, anything negative from the court. Merit retention is not an opportunity for people to vote whether or not they like opinions. But we're all human, so we do. But that's not what it's about. What it's about is whether or not these people have done anything that deserves them to be removed. That doesn't sound very democratic, but I'll tell you why it is. I've spent the last 23 months going around the state trying to tell editorial boards what's going on. And I was up in Jacksonville before the editorial board there, and one of the editorial board members said, "Do you mean to tell me that I, as an American, don't have the right to vote against somebody I don't like?" I said, "Look, politics is politics. However, the courts are different. We don't want to politicize the court. Let me ask you this. You see the mess that we have, or I think it's a mess, in the House, in the Senate, in Congress? Now, do you want that system in the court system? Ask yourself that." So the editor asked me, he said, "Well, I'll give you an example. Rosemary Barquette was a Supreme Court justice years ago, and she was pro-choice. And he said, I'm pro-life. Do you mean to tell me I don't have the right to vote against her?" And I said, "I'm pro-life too." That is not the decision for you to make. The decision is as follows. I'm an attorney, and I've picked plenty of juries. Now let's be honest here. Every single one of you has prejudices and biases. And whoever says no is lying. So the real question, when I pick a jury, the question that you always ask the potential jurors is, are you able to put aside your prejudice and your bias and follow the law? Yes or no? That is the question. And if the answer is no, then that person is out. If the answer is yes, that's what you want, someone with an open mind. Isn't that what you want? So I told him that you're prejudiced too. You know, the question is whether or not you are able to follow the law. That is the question that the judges, all the justices, have prejudices and biases too. All of them do. The question for retention is whether or not they are able to put those prejudices aside and follow the law. Now, let me tell you what happened. Back in 2010 was the last time that there was a merit retention election. 4 justices of the Supreme Court were up for retention. But 2, Justice Labarga and Justice Perry, came under attack. And through the internet, it was a disorganized attack on them, just pure criticism, and their numbers dropped. So after that election, we noticed, a group of us sat together one day and noticed that their numbers had dropped significantly, which was unprecedented. Their bar numbers are so high. People tell me, well, it's lawyers voting for them. What do you expect? Well, let's use some logic, not some rhetoric. Every time a judge or justice decides a case, 50% of the parties are mad, aren't they? Right? So at best, the number should be 50%. Yet their numbers are usually 80s and 90%. So why did this number go down? Well, what we did was we went across the state. We organized this group. We went across the state, and we did focus groups in Jacksonville, Orlando, Tampa, and Miami. Does everybody know how that works? I'm behind a two-way mirror, and there's 12 people in front of that mirror and somebody who asks people questions. So I had to sit through many, many interviews on the other side, not saying a word. And believe me, for a politician, that was not easy. But let me tell you what we found out. Number one, out of over 130 people that were interviewed across the state, African American, Hispanic Cuban, Hispanic non-Cuban, white, everything you can imagine. We took a true representation of the state to try and find out what was going on. Out of 130 people, do you know how many people could name one justice? 0. 0. Not one person could name one justice. The other thing that we realized was between 24 and 27% of everyone that votes no. Votes no. You know why? My wife told me not to use this word, so I'll just say, because they're angry. That's what they said. So they vote no. 25% of the people vote no on everything. They don't read it, they vote no. The other thing that we found is as you go down ballot, you know, the first race is the president, and then the U.S. Senate, and then it goes down from there. The last one are the justices. The other thing we found consistently is as you go down ballot, as much as a third do not vote. A third. But the people that vote no always vote no. Do you see the problem? Okay. Let me tell you about Iowa. The state of Iowa in 2010 had a merit retention election. And what happened there was there were 3 justices that were up. The legislature sent up a bill on same-sex marriage that had passed. Now, regardless of how you feel about same-sex marriage, what the bill was actually about was whether or not people can make a contract with another person. Now, regardless of how you feel about same-sex marriage, you cannot say that 2 African Americans can't make a contract between each other, or 2 Hispanics can't make a contract between each other. Well, you can't say that 2 persons that are same-sex can't make a contract between each other. So the Supreme Court unanimously struck down that opinion because it was written wrong. It was written wrong. It wasn't the merit of the question, it was how it was written. How did they do that? Well, it turns out that over 95% of the money into that race came from out of state. You get what's happening here? Look at Florida. Not one person that we did a sampling across the state could name one justice. So the other thing we learned was who first defines the justices wins. Now, in Iowa, these are people beyond reproach that were on the bench in Iowa. But it was struck down unanimously, but there were only 3 that were up for election. The commercials that started airing were not commercials of, this justice doesn't read the law, doesn't follow the law, doesn't follow the Constitution. No, it was, this is the end of Western civilization as we know it because of their decision. The sun will not rise in the east tomorrow, and the sky will fall. But the people of Iowa didn't take it seriously. They didn't take it seriously because they thought, these are outstanding people. Do you know what happened? All 3 of them lost. That is unprecedented in American history. But that showed one very important thing. That showed there's a flaw in our system. That showed, you know what? Special interests, because it was special interests that spend that money from out of state. Special interests can go into a state now, and it's a hell of a lot cheaper to take down a justice than it is to take down a governor or change the balance of power in the House or the Senate. You see what happened? So since no one knew who these people were, since the legal community thought, well, this will never happen. Well, it did happen. It did happen. Now, what do I care? What do you care? Why is that important to you? How does the Supreme Court of Florida affect me, and why is that more important than anything else? I'll tell you why. You guys ever heard of a case called Williams v. Scott? Williams v. Scott? Williams is a hard-working public employee. Scott he's this other guy. What is that case about? I'll tell you what that case is about. In 1974, the Florida legislature created the Florida retirement system. And I know you guys know this, but I want to tell you this because facts matter. Facts matter. 1974, the Florida legislature created the Florida retirement system. They turned it into a non-contributory pension system. That means the state would pay it all. In exchange, the workers, the public employees, had to give in also. Part of what they had to give in is they must be a member of Florida retirement system. So it was give and take. As a matter of fact, when that happened, the legislature said this is actually a contractual agreement that we are entering in with the people of Florida. Now, what happened with that pension system? I know that there are pension systems across the state and across the United States that are in big trouble. But all the experts will tell you that a rock-solid pension is funded at 80%. At 80%. The Florida retirement system, Senate Bill 2100, the bill that passed the Senate, and I'd like to say after I left, the bill that passed the Senate took away 3% from public employees. And the reasons sounded great. You know, everybody has to give in a little bit. Times are tough. We need money. Blah, blah, blah. I was before an editorial board in Miami, and one of the editors there said, well, Senator Villalobos, you know, times are tough. You know, shouldn't public employees sacrifice also? I said, no. I'll tell you why. There's a big difference when you work for a private company than when you work for when you're a public employee. When you work for a private company, you don't have to join their retirement system. When you work as a public employee, you have to join. It's give and take. And I said, plus, when you enter into a contractual agreement with someone, you can't, in the middle of their contract, say, well, gee, times are tough in the newspaper, so I guess we'll cut your salary by 3%. Okay, let me get back to this. Why did this happen? Why did this happen? Well, this happened because the state of Florida needed money. And they said, well, times are tough. You know, we're doing this to shore up your pension, to make it stronger by you contributing. Well, let me go back. See, I go back and forth, but I always tie it up. Let me go back. All the experts across the country say 80% funded is rock solid. Do you know where Florida retirement system is funded? 87.9%. Fourth strongest in the country. Fourth strongest in the country. Why should we be penalized? Why should we be penalized? What we did worked. Now, that case was challenged by the best frickin' attorney in the state of Florida, Ron Meyer, who's over there. So this case goes to Judge Fulford up in Tallahassee. And you know what she did? She carefully listened to all of the facts, and she looked at the law, and she applied the law. And she ruled as follows, and I'm reading from the order. This court cannot set aside its constitutional obligation because a budget crisis exists in the state of Florida. To do so would be in direct contravention of this court's oath to follow the law. Follow the law. In 1974, the legislature declared that the rights to the members in the non-contributory pension plan were of a contractual nature, and that such rights shall be legally enforceable as valid contractual rights and shall not be abridged in any way. She further states, the 2011 legislature, when faced with a budget shortfall, turned to the employees of the state of Florida and ignored the contractual rights given to them by the legislature in 1974. Considering the entire record before it, this court finds that certain provisions of Senate Bill 2100 constitute an unconstitutional impairment of the plaintiff's contract with the state of Florida. She finally finishes, she says, to find otherwise would mean that a contract with our state government has no meaning, and the citizens of our state can place no trust in the work of the legislature. Now, this case is now before the Florida Supreme Court. Now, how are they going to rule? I don't know. I really don't know. I wish I could tell you. And I cannot guarantee you that they will rule the same way. Do you remember Iowa? That race? Where did that money come from? Who funded that? On Saturday, June 2nd, 2012, I had the privilege of speaking to the AFL-CIO in Hollywood, Florida. And you know, the Lord is a good Lord, because that day, as I'm having breakfast just before I'm going to speak, I open up the paper, and it's a Sun Sentinel. Saturday, June 2nd, 2012. And the editorial is, State Senate botched it. So they're talking to a guy named Mark Wilson. Mark Wilson is the president of the Florida Chamber of Commerce. Now, hold on. You know, the Florida Chamber of Commerce is supposed to promote job creation in the state of Florida. Now, what I don't get is, no, Andy, it's not that they don't do it. They work against us. Because what I don't understand is if you want good paying jobs, that requires one thing, an education, right? So anyways, they're talking to Mark Wilson. This is the editorial. And it says, the question is, public employees get good benefit packages to offset lower salaries. Would the Chamber of Commerce support salary increases as part of pension reform? Salary increases for you. So Mark Wilson says, there was a time when everyone agreed that you made a little bit less in salary, but that you got better benefits and retirement. I recall seeing a study. I had the study. I remember seeing a study that came out last year that said not only have public sector salaries reached parity with the private sector, but that salaries have actually gotten a little better in the public sector than in the private sector. Well, it's in the study. Now, let me tell you about studies. Look, members of the legislature are regular people. They don't think so, but they are. Hey, I cut my grass. Right, Barbie? My wife is over there. She's a public school teacher, by the way. So we are mere mortals. I'm a lawyer. I know a lot about a few things, but there's a lot I don't know about. I was talking to Ron earlier today, and I said, you know, Ron, in our business, one of the most important things is to know your limitations. Very important. Well, I don't know anything about road building or bridge building. So I have to rely, when a bill would come before me dealing with road building, I had to rely on the Department of Transportation or on a study. But here's the problem. I'm a product of public education, and my teachers always taught me to read the whole study, not just the summary. Not just the summary. But that's how it works. Now let's get back to the study. Have you guys ever heard of Florida Today? Well, Florida Today is one of the largest news organizations in the state of Florida. And Matt Reed is the editor. Now I'm going to read to you something he wrote, but he is a good guy. He is pointing out what's in the study. You know, the study that the chamber thinks is so important. Okay? Consider the November report on teacher compensation by the Conservative Heritage Foundation and American Enterprise Institute. The new conservative reasoning includes a logic trap that no educator can defeat. Now, why am I talking about this stuff? Remember, the question I asked you was, who funds this stuff? Who helped fund the campaign in Iowa? And who is helping fund the campaign here in Florida against the 3 justices? Here's what the study says. Public school teachers receive salaries 19.3% lower than private sector workers who have the same type of college degrees, Heritage says. Thus, the marketplace has assigned a lower value to education degrees than to business or engineering degrees. Furthermore, master's degrees in education do not correlate strongly to higher test scores. Therefore, teachers are overpaid for skills of less value to the marketplace than the skills of private sector workers. Therefore, teachers are gouging American taxpayers and must be stopped. Quote, "We conclude that public school teacher salaries are comparable to those paid to similarly skilled private sector workers, but that more generous fringe benefits for public school teachers, including greater job security, make total compensation 52% greater than fair market levels, equivalent to more than $120 billion overcharged by teachers to taxpayers each year." See, I didn't want to come here and give you rhetoric. I want to give you facts, because I want you to know where this is coming from. Lower IQs. But this is where the Heritage Foundation and American Enterprise Institute research explores new depth to torpedo teachers. Their report states, public school teachers should not get raises because they are less intelligent than private sector employees. Although the College Board is reluctant to say exactly what the SAT measures, it is essentially an IQ test, says the report by Washington researcher Jason Richwine, PhD, and Andrew G. Gibbs, PhD. In 2010, the College Board asked students taking the SAT about their intended college major. Students who indicated that education was their intended major earned a combined math and verbal score of 967. Below the average of 1,017. It adds, even active teachers exhibit low cognitive ability compared to other college graduates. I love them. She made me do it. You see what's going on? Now, a lot of my colleagues don't spend the time with teachers because they're not married to one. Or they went to school so long ago, they forgot. But I really I don't get this animosity. I don't understand why I have to be defending teachers in the legislature. I don't get that. I really don't. But I don't have to put up with that. And neither do you. Neither do you. You see why this election is so important? Because a group of very intelligent people have figured out that they can attack the people that are deciding your future. That's exactly what's going on. That is exactly what's going on. And like I said, 25% of the people vote no, and a third don't vote to the end. This is truly one of the most important elections because this has never happened before. You see, it happened in Iowa and it worked. So now they're here. Now they're here. And if this works, every justice and every judge is going to think, gee, if I rule in favor of this one teacher, is the whole industry going to come after me? Or is Big Sugar going to come after me? Or is our petroleum companies going to come after me? You understand what's going on here? Listen, I know you guys are very smart, and I know you guys work very hard, but here's what I'm going to ask you to do. Please go out. This is so important. I've spent the last 2 years of my life going around the state telling people that this was coming. The editorial boards thought I was going crazy because they're like, prove it. Well, I couldn't prove an invasion where you couldn't see the tanks or the ships. But as Andy said, when the party a few weeks ago, when the Republican Party of Florida a few weeks ago said that they were going to engage, well, there you go. Now, listen, I'm a Republican. I was the majority leader in the Florida Senate. And there are very prominent Republicans that have said this is wrong. We do not want to politicize the courts. For two reasons. Number one, the courts work. Do you know that they are only 6/10? They're a co-equal branch of government. They are only 6/10 of 1% of the entire budget. Can you imagine that? Somebody said, oh, they treat them like they were the Department of Transportation. I wish. Department of Transportation has a lot of money. A lot of money. But this is a terrible assault on democracy as we know it. It's not about the three justices. It's about whether or not you're going to allow special interests, outside special interests, to come here and bully the people that make decisions that affect all of us. You know, I was very thankful that happened a couple of weeks ago because now they see what happened. And let me tell you what the real problem with a party getting involved. Because some people have said, well, the Democrats should engage. And I said, no, that's not a good idea. Parties should not engage in this fight. Let me tell you what the real problem is. It's not that a party is pushing an agenda now. That's what parties do. That's not the problem. The problem is that by a party engaging in doing this, outside money now can go into the party, and the $5 that my grandmother sends the party is commingled with $1 million that a special interest group, charter schools, can put in and spend. And then there's no way of tracking that. You see what's happening? Now, I'm not saying that people don't have a right to spend the amount of money they want to spend on a campaign. That is not the issue. The issue is I, as a citizen, as a voter, have a right to know if somebody's putting up $5 million in an issue. I have a right to know who did that. The election's coming up. I'm not here to tell you vote one way or the other. I'm here to tell you to vote. I'm here to beg you, really, because it's not about your pension issue, because I can't guarantee what's going to happen there. It's about the integrity of our democracy. That's what this is about. And I love this country, and I know you do too, but it is up to us. It is up to us. It is up to you. And as Andy said, it only takes a little bit. Go out and vote, and God bless all of you guys.
I'm here to tell you, honey, that I'm bad to the bone. Bad.